Okay, let's look at the page. So the Eis Dal, Sif Dal, the Eis Dal that identifies six levels, sorry. Or to explain, Eisin Ritzaynei Shamakim, which he said earlier, is achieved dafka through the Ava of B'chom Ba'itcha. So Rotz and Makif, that's Kutsha Brichu, and Makim place is Shchina. The whole Kavanah is the Yichud of Kutsha Brichu Shchinte, the unity of these two primary expressions of the Eibishter, Malchus, Kutsha Brichu and Shchinte, or Havayan Elikim. So the Ois identified, we'll just run through them all. And that is the first level is Zoh and Malchus. We're talking Atzilus in general. Second level, higher still, is Malchus and Atzilus itself is Mashpia. Is now on the Kutsha Brichu column. And then Malchus descends in Bia. Okay? Next model, Chachma and Bina, again Mashpia, Makabel basically. Next model, Keser and Chachma. Then he began to speak what he calls Abiyah HaKlolis. But that term is not necessary for us to understand even. It's just the levels, but just as we mentioned, Ein Sof is Atzilus, and Bria is Ak, didn't put this on the page, and Yitzira is Keser, and Asiya is Atzilus. But Bachlal, it's higher than Atzilus. Where Atzilus, classic Atzilus, where Atzilus in Aklolis is Ein Sof. Anyway, therefore, I mean, it is Negir because Atzilus Aklolis is Atzilus. So this is in the Ein Sof. This is all the Sfiras the Ein Sof. Hence, there are Sfiras the Ein Sof in Atzilus the Klolis, which is Ein Sof. Obviously, there are many levels in Ein Sof. So all to say, the Mashpia, the Makif, is Ein Sof, as he mentions in the Maimon, the term Igul HaGodol, the great circle that surrounds, as it were, all of creation, spiritual and physical, of course. And then in the Ein Sof itself, there's the Shechina level. That's the Kav, which emerges from the Ein Sof, which is rooted in Malchus the Ein Sof. So that's Shechina. Bekitzer, Malchus the Ein Sof is Shechina relative to the Ein Sof itself. Bekitzer. In the brackets, he added that the Kav that is drawn from Ein Sof, which now produces Hishtalshalus. So the details of that is, from the Kav comes Keser, and then ultimately Atzilus, etc. So he identifies the levels here as the Etzem HaKav is invested in Ak. And the Ha'orah of Kav, first Akudim, then the Kudim, which is Toyo, and then Atzilus, which is Brudim. That's just detail in the Kav, who is rooted in Malchus the Ein Sof. And he mentions this detail to illustrate the successive levels of Amshocha, of Shechina, of relative indwelling, of Eiris and Kelim. Clear? And finally, this is all in the Ein Sof Nifnei Atzimtzum itself. Oir mitzad atzmai, or sometimes Chassidus uses the term Etzem ha'oir. That's Kutsha Brichu. Chitzonius ha'oir. In all, in Lifnei Tzimtzum, that's Shchinte. Now, the understanding of all this is another matter, but the first thing is to get the geography. And I think we're clear in the geography. Now, what's a bit confusing is that in the Maimon it goes back and forth a little bit. I'm not sure if I yesterday was conveyed correctly, but I relearned it. And therefore, what I did was, as an aid to learning the Maimon, 191, 192, I number the end of the discussion of the particular levels. I'm not going to repeat it again now, but if you have this as an aid, because as you can see, on page 190, it goes back to 1 again. And then there's a big square brackets in 192, which is confusing. It's a square bracket. It's only to explain. So If you just in the Chazorah, you see the number 1 on page 191. Can you see, identify the numbers? So that's the 2 pages together. This lists them, and this tells you where and what he's speaking about, where it ends, where the discussion at that level ends. We could learn it again, because it wasn't very clear. We learned it the first time. Should we?
Definitely.
Okay, so we'll learn it then using these numbers on the so that we make sure that we're right. That what I wrote is correct. Okay, so let's start this Dalet again. See if Dalet again. It's all to explain. Is only affected through an ava b'chol ma'itcha. How could that be? That's it. But first, understanding the oimek, as he says, the oimek, the depth of what is meant by Eisin Ritzonei Shel, making the will of the omnipresent. The Yuvan behektem. You have to understand the Ratzon and Makim. Binyan Oisin Ritzonei Shel, and what is meant by making the Ritzonei Shel. The Hinei Ratzon Umaki, if Ratzon, of course, is transcendent b'chinas Seived, Umakim b'chinas Mamale, and space is Mamale Kedlakaman, as we will presently explain. So, what is the meaning? Bisman, what the Gemara says that that strangers will pass your sheep and you'll be free to fulfill the mitzvahs. That's when the Eisin Ritzonei Shel Makom. So what does that mean? That's an avodah of yichud seva v'mamale. So we're going to see. This is a critical point. I don't know if the Maimon explains it, but it comes out that there is avodah. There is avodah b'chol avavcha v'chol nafshecha. And moreover, the person is doing mitzvahs. It's still not yichud seva v'mamale. True, it's amshocha. We'll see that nuance to be seen. But the yichud is, we're saying, it's only Eisin Ritzonei Shel, which is the ava b'chol ma'itcha. Okay, to be explained. Shazel klolis inyan hashemes, klolis inyan avodah. That's the general inyan of avodah. That's the whole avodah is to affect this yichud. If you do inyan hashemes, as expressed in the Hashem's names, shesoivev. In other words, other language for the same thing. Shesoivev is not a name of Hashem. It's a description of sorts. The name itself. Shesoivev b'chin Hashem avayim, mali b'chin Hashem alikim. Therefore, yichud seiv mali hu inyan yichud avaya alikim. That's what we mean by Eisin Ritzonei Shel. It's yichud avaya alikim. Shazeh isa b'zoya do kol deraisa. About which the Zohar says this is the general principle of the Torah. Now, from here to the end of the Ois are the 6 levels. We mean this on all levels, this unity. All levels, in totality, there's going to be this interplay of Havai and Elikim. There are many levels, starting with so there's one level of Havaya, which is past, present, and future is one. So that's already beyond time. It's a very high level, but it's the lowest level of Havaya because it's measured by the fact that it's beyond time. We explained yesterday, or the day before, that there's Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, that's not spelled with Nekudus, which the Nekudus, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei spelled with a whole many combinations of Nekudus, reflecting different midas or spheres. But then there's the Etzem Shem Havaya, which is higher than Nekudus. And then the third level of Ad Shem Havaya Shem Bei Pirush. It's not just Yud-Kei Vav-Kei without Nekudus, without a particular articulation, but beyond Pirush altogether. That's Mamish the Etzem. I think I said Etzem by Shem Bei Nekudus. There's relative levels. So he's saying there's not one level In Shem Havai, there's many levels. So in the Yichud of Havai and Elikim, there's many levels. Velikim b'lashon Rabbi, Velikim is plural, implying right there many levels. Ubegematria Teva, all the way down to having shown the numerical value of nature. So there's many levels to this Yichud. What's common to all of them, it's the inyan of Seviv and Mamali, relatively speaking. So it's understood that Yichud Hashem Havai, which is the Yichud of Seviv and Mamali, Yichud Ma Uban, Ma being the Mashpia, Zoh, Ban being Malchus, so Yeshne B'chol Madregis. It's in all of the levels. We will recall, the whole reason we're going into this whole explanation is to explain the avodah of Yitzchak, the be'er, the well, and why Yitzchak dafka is k'ata avinu, and moreover, as explained elsewhere in Chassidus, why the whole arichas of the story of the marriage of Yitzchak, because Yitzchak's marriage with Rivka is the first yichud of Ma Uban, and that's the whole Torah. That's the Klal Doraisa. So the yichud zeh nasa the ma'isa mitzvahs. Now this yichud, I just said earlier that the mitzvah itself doesn't need the b'chol moedcha, so we'll see. We'll see. But he's saying now that in general this yichud is affected through ma'isa mitzvahs. That's what you said before every mitzvah, which we don't. But others do. We say it again, as mentioned before. Baruch She'omar, and we have in mind all the mitzvahs that we do during the day. We already put in on tefillin and the talis, so it goes in that as well. So we say the Shebicha Kutchabricha Shchinte, the Kutchabricha B'chinas Soivev, the Holy One, blessed be He. Kodesh, that's Soivev. Kodesh and Muvdali is holy and removed. That's what Kedusha means, removed. Shchinte, dwelling in B'chinas Mamale. That is Mamale, Shesheich Lamata, that dwells below. Now, as he said, so this yichud is on all of the levels. All of the levels. The klol is the general in the kutchabricha shchinte koi al zo malchus. We're talking about Atzilus here. The kutchabricha b'chinas zo, shchinte b'chinas malchus. That's number one. That's the end of number one. He'll go back to it, but that's number one on your page, on your sheet. David, you got the sheet? The handwritten one. Now in more detail, where's this going? Just to know, we're going to number two. No, we're going with the next 5 lines, helps us understand it. Number 2 is Malchus Datzilus. Malchus is Kutchabricha. And Malchus and Bia, that's Shechina. That's where he's going from here till number 2. And then goes back to number 1. It's confusing. But to contrast the two. But Proteus, you're saying again, but Malchus Atzma, even with the Malchus, there's base Madregas Eil. The Malchus Commission Batzilus. We're stressing, friends, they're learning, they're just getting the geography straight, the words, explanations, as much as we get, but we'll leave that. The Malchus Commission Batzilus, she's Tatzilus. So Malchus in Atzilus is, notwithstanding its unique character, it's part of the Svidus of Atzilus, about all of whom is said, the Iyu v'Garan Moyochad. He and his causations, his Kalim, his Svidus are one. So who's the Ihu? That's Kutchabrichu. So Malchus of Atzilus, in detail, the Proteus, is bound up with Kutchabrichu, like Zoh. So in that sense, relative to its descent in Bia, it's the Mashpia. It's Kutchabrichu. Because Bebia, then when it descends in the Bia, it's called Shchinte. Meaning, it could stop here, but there's this adding explanation. Even the Nakud of Malchus, its essence, in other words, relative essence, which pierces the veil between Atzilus and Bia, and is invested, these words of the Al-Debin Tanya, in the Pnimius of Bria, that's the chamber of the Holy of Holies. This is similar to, and I don't know why he adds this, but the neshama descending the matter to think about it. Before, I know, because he wants to talk about the nekuda of Malchus and the ispashtas of Malchus. So then the nekuda of Malchus is similar to course, that's why he's bringing this. The neshama invested in the guf, but before it's mislabish in the koiches pratim. The body hasn't developed, and it's not invested. The primis in the koiches pratim. That's the etzem. All to say, mid-sentence, even this level, the etzem of malchus, b'chinas shchinte, as it descends into biyah, it's already shchina, it's already compromised, it's already invested in some way. And for sure, the manifestation, like the neshama, that's the analogy. For sure, the neshama in essence in the body is already mislavish, but for sure, the neshama is integrated into all of the koiches, that's for sure islapshus, just like malchus. End of, that's number 2. In malchus atzmo. Namely, malchus and atzilus kutchebrichu, malchus in biyah, and in biyah, this big parenthesis, we mean not just the pnimius of biyah, but the chitzenius of biyah, not just the nekuda of malchus, but malchus suffuses biyah. The analogy, just not just the neshama in, connected to the body, but suffusing the body. All of that is shchina. Clear? Aval b'chlol is not going back, and it goes back to 1 now. The cholos yosin gam b'chinas hamalchus k'moi shibat silus or b'chinas shchintei. Malchus in atzilus is shchina. We just said now malchus is kutchebricha, but that's beprotis. But b'chol is going back to number 1. V'zo kutchebricha. That's what's confusing here a little bit. That it's back and forth. Are we clear? That's back to 1. Now number 3. Where are we going with 3? Chacham and bin.
He basically at the end is just recapping the whole thing. Just don't forget the original plan.
Right. Yeah. Now number 3, Chacham and bin. There's even a higher level of unity. The beginner's Chacham and bin. The Chachma, Chachma, which is in the Nekuda yet unformed, that's Kutchabricha. It's oir, virtually no Keli. Bina Shabon Nasis is Chalkas the Protim. Bina is the analysis and the detail of B'chines Elikim v'Shchinte. So the Yichud Chachma Bina is a higher level than the Yichud of Malchus and Zoh, or Zoh and Malchus. Well, the Ma'ila Yosef are now going higher still for where we're going to, Kesed and Chachma. In Egam HaChachma Shereishas HaSvidus, even the Chachma, because the beginning of the Svidus, relatively speaking, relative to Kesed, Nikra Shchinte, that's Shchina. The Kutchabricha, so what's Kutchabricha here? B'chinas HaKesed. What's the parallel within the person? The 2 levels to Kesed, right? Atik and Arich. That's Tainik and Rotzen. So overall, however, they are makifim. That's the 4th level. Now going to the 5th level. The 5th level, let's just look at it on the page. So the Oirin Sof, that's Kutchabricha, the Igala Godel. And the Kav, what happens to the Kav? The Kav, important detail coming. The Kav is rooted in the Ein Sof, but then pierces through, as it were, the Tzimtzum. In the Ein Sof itself, the Kav is Sheshorshe Mimalchos the Ein Sof. There are the spheres as they are, even in the Ein Sof, but they're all infinite. It's all these relative terms. This Esa Spheres HaKnus is even deeper than the spheres, the Ein Sof. At any rate, so this is the Shechina. The Shechina is the lowest level. Shechina is the contact point between, or the beginning of connection between Elyon and Tachten. That's what Shechina is. So Malchus the Ein Sof is already the faintest articulation within the Ein Sof of sovereignty, of being Melech, of the Eibishter's desire for a Tachten. But the whole reality of the Tachten is eons away from emergence, not in time, but in Inyan. So the Kav is rooted in Malchus of Ein Sof. So that's the Shechina. And in the brackets, we got detail of that Shechina indwelling. The Etzem HaKav invested in Ak, the ha'ara in akudim, and then lower in the kudim, which is toyo, lower still atzilus, which is brudim. This is all post-symptom as the oil continues, the kaf continues to descend downward in its progression of descent and the various stages in that. Akudim, nekudim, and brudim. Yeah, as we've encountered. That's in brackets. So this was 5. So let's now see it in the Maimon itself. You might want to add just a note on the side here. So what are the abiyah ha'kloliyim, the big picture abiyah? Atzilus is Ein Sof, Bria is Ak, Adam Kadman, Yitzira is Keser, and Nasi is Atzilus. It's relative to what he's, understand therefore the language that he's going to say in a minute. Now, so now he goes back to 1. I could put a little 1 over here. So it's contrasting. The Hashem Shemachot Atzilus HaPrati is just like Malchus Atzilus, the classic individual Malchus Atzilus HaPrati is. Sheshechenes b'biyah nikras shchintei. That's Shechina. That's actually, friend, that's actually level 2. You can make a note there. That is level 2. That Malchus of Atzilus, that's Shechina, and that's Malchus in Biyah. That Malchus in Atzilus is Shechina. It's Kutchabrichu. That's really number 2. At any rate, so just like Malchus of Atzilus when it descends into Biyah, that's called Shechina. Likewise, the kav, we wrote sheshorshay, but here the lashon is that it's drawn from Malchus the Ein Sof, which is Malchus Atzilus the Klolus. Clear? Every term is clear. Umistabesh is Biyah Klolium. What's Biyah Klolium? Biyah Klolium is Ak and Keser and Atzilus. So that is Shechina. And the Ein Sof is going to say is the Igel HaGodel. Now in the brackets, which we added in the thing, Kiddush Etzem HaKav Mei B'chinas Ak, Adam the B'riyah the Klolus. The Horas HaKav and the Chitzonius or reflection of the Kav is in the next levels of Akudim and Akudim, which is Toyo, Achaba Gambatilus, which is Brudim, and that's Adam Dasiya the Klolus. I hope it all makes sense. All fits in. Yes, everybody. Yeah. So good. So all this is called Nikra Shchinte. So what's Kutchabrichu? V'Ein Sof, the Igel HaGodel. Shelifnei Tzimtzum b'chinas Kutchabrichu. So that is number 5. Clear? So what you see next, I put in square brackets because it can be confusing. Adding another level here, was he going here? It's just explain this. And then L'mayla Yoser, after the square brackets, concludes with the 6th level. So let's read the square brackets. Are we clear? Yeah. Just like we said, this is level 2. That's level 1. That's level 1. That's level 1. In Atzilus Shchinte is level 1. See, that's just confusing. When he said before, just 2 lines in the bottom of level 4, that's 2. Now he's speaking 1. That's level 1. You might want to add that. So he's contrasting the first model, the classic model. Zo is Kutchabrichu and Malchus is Shchinte. So Gam b'chinas malchus atzilas haklolis in this bigger picture of atzilas haklolis, k'Moishe koydem hatzimtzum, if like it's before the tzimtzum, so shoyresh hakav, the source, which is malchus dein sof, or b'chinas shchinte, that's a level of shchina. It's just elaborating what he just said. It's not a new inyan. Very often Vehina introduces another level, but it's not. Now, v'zeh inyan beis hamadreg is the tira ilah v'tira tata. The Zohar speaks about these two levels of purity: the higher purity, the lower purity. So, what is it? The tira ilah koydem hatzimtzum, which is what we're speaking about right now, and tira tata, the same language but lower, hulachar hatzimtzum. That's post tzimtzum. That's malchus descending into malchus of Atzilus, malchus into Biyah. Further elaboration, but seeing the same level. But gam koydem hatzimtzum yeshna beis madreg is the tiri lova tiri tata. But these two terms exist even before the tzimtzum, namely, as we just saying now, shemalchus dein sof k'moishe koydem hatzimtzum u'bchinas tiri tata, and that's called shchinte. So malchus dein sof is already called lift that tzimtzum tira tata. And what is tira ilah lift that tzimtzum? That would be the svidus, the zod the insof, the svidus the insof. Is that clear? Nothing was added here, just further elaborated. And he just added also in the terms we find tira tata and tira ilah. Usually it's pre-tzimtzum, post-tzimtzum. It also exists pre-tzimtzum. There's the lower tira, there's malchus dein sof, that's the shechina pre-tzimtzum, and the igel hagadol is tira ilah in the words of our maamar. I hope we're not lost. Huh? Okay, you use this, that should be helpful. If you don't get every single word, okay, we should. Okay, concluding, the Mali Yoisa and High is still now coming to number 6. This is all if that tzimtzum. The external level of the oil if that tzimtzum, which has already connection to creation. That shalach that tzimtzum yiyam wakim lo'ilam is that post tzimtzum. It factors. Liftei the tzimtzum is factored into the intent that post tzimtzum there should be a place for oilimus. That's b'chinas shchinte. But the essence of the oil, that's the 6th level. Concluding, it's talking about Maisa now. Didn't mention Mechon Ba'itcha. We're drawing down pre-tzimtzum Lagabi, the B'chinas Shalachei Tzimtzum into the Tzimtzum. That's the first level. 6 is going from the top down. Till Dam Shochem is all the Malchus. Okay, so we'll continue based. No.
How come he doesn't mention from down to Biyah on the recap, the last 2 lines?
Lawyer there. Okay, we go a bit further. Maybe not. Tomorrow starts the Ma'aseh with the Emek HaMelech, and I want to tell you a little bit of the history. And it's just fascinating that Rabbi brings him, and however, there's not. He brings him Chaim Vital. I mentioned yesterday that there were many that were opposed to him. He himself, I just checked. He himself. Yeah, enough to find that he himself a Talmud of the Arizal. It seems he was. But the whole vikuach was with Rabbi Chaim Vital. Rabbi Chaim Vital was the primary. He was the writer of the Izal's teachings, and he differed Rabbi Chaim Vital on many things. And therefore, the Italian book Kabbalah came out against him. But Chassidus does bring from him. But what's fascinating is brings from him, but this case doesn't. We'll see tomorrow. And a little more history too.